They waited inside the door in a long line under the arch-roofed ceiling, 55 of them against one wall on the left, 55 of them against the right wall, and 5 of them way down at the very end. "Mr. Interlocutor," said Joseph briskly. They resembled nothing more than those preliminary erections of a sculptor, the wire frame, the first tendons of clay, the muscles and a thin lacquer of skin. They were unfinished, all 115 of them. They were parchment-colored, and the skin was stretched as if to dry, from bone to bone. The bodies were intact, only the watery humors had evaporated from them. "The climate," said the caretaker, "it preserves them very dry." "How long have they been here?" asked Joseph. "Some 1 year, some 5, Signor, some 10, some 70. There was an embarrassment of horror. You started with the first man on your right, hooked and wired upright against the wall, and he was not good to look upon. And you went on to the woman next to him, who was unbelievable, and then to a man who was horrendous, and then to a woman who was very sorry she was dead, and in such a place as this." "What are they doing here?" said Joseph. "Their relatives did not pay the rent upon their graves." "Is there a rent?" "Si, Signor, 20 pesos a year. Or, if they desire the permanent internment, 170 pesos. But our people, they are very poor, as you must know, and 170 pesos is as much as many of them make in 2 years. So they carry their dead here and place them into the earth for 1 year, and the 20 pesos are paid, with fine intentions of paying each year and each year. But each year and each year after the first year, they have a burro to buy, or a new mouth to feed, or maybe 3 new mouths, and the dead, after all, are not hungry, and the dead, after all, can pull no plows. Or there is a new wife, or there is a roof in need of mending, and the dead, remember, can be in no beds with a man, and the dead, you understand, can keep no rain off one, and so it is that the dead are not paid up upon their rent." "Then what happens? Are you listening, Marie?" said Joseph. Marie counted the bodies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. "What?" she said quietly. "Are you listening?" "I think so. What?" "Oh, yes, I'm listening." 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. "Well then," said the little man, "I call a trabajando, and with his delicate shovel at the end of the first year, he does dig and dig and dig down. How deep do you think we dig, Signor?" 6 feet, that's the usual depth. Ah, no. There, Signor, you would be wrong. Knowing that after the first year the rent is liable not to be paid, we bury the poorest 2 feet down. It is less work, you understand. Of course, we must judge by the family who own the body. Some of them we bury sometimes 3, sometimes 4 feet deep, sometimes 5, sometimes 6, depending on how rich the family is, depending on what the chances are we won't have to dig him out from his place a year later. And let me tell you, Signor, when we bury a man the whole 6 feet deep, we are very certain of his staying. We have never dug up a 6-foot buried one yet. That is the accuracy with which we know the money of the people." 21, 22, 23, Marie's lips moved with a small whisper. "And the bodies which are dug up are placed down here against the wall with the other compañeros." "Do the relatives know the bodies are here?" "See!" the small man pointed. "This one, yo veo? It is new. It has been here but 1 year. His madre y padre know him to be here. But have they money? Ah, no." "Isn't that rather gruesome for his parents?" The little man was earnest. "They never think of it," he said. "Did you hear that, Marie?" "What?" 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. "Yes, they never think of it." "What if the rent is paid again after a lapse?" inquired Joseph. "In that time," said the caretaker, "the bodies are reburied for as many years as are paid." "Sounds like blackmail," said Joseph. The little man shrugged, hands in pockets. "We must live." You are certain no one can pay the 170 pesos all at once," Joseph said. "So in this way, you get them for 20 pesos a year, year after year for maybe 30 years. If they don't pay, you threaten to send Mamacita or little Nino to the catacomb." "We must live," said the little man. 51, 52, 53. Marie counted in the center of the long corridor the standing dead on all sides of her. They were screaming. They looked as if they had leaped, snapped upright in their graves. clutched their hands over their shriveled bosoms and screamed, jaws wide, tongues out, nostrils flared, and been frozen that way. All of them had open mouths. Theirs was a perpetual screaming. They were dead, and they knew it. In every raw fiber and evaporated organ, they knew it. She stood listening to them scream. They say dogs hear sounds humans never hear, sounds so many decibels higher than normal hearing that they seem non-existent. The corridor swarmed with screams. Screams poured from terror-yawed lips and dry tongues, screams you couldn't hear because they were so high. Joseph walked to one standing body. "Say ah," he said. 65, 66, 67, counted Marie among the screams. "Here is an interesting one," said the proprietor. They saw a woman, with arms flung to her head, mouth wide, teeth intact, whose hair was wildly flourished, long and shimmery on her head. Her eyes were small, pale, white-blue eggs in her skull. "Sometimes this happens. This woman, she is a cataleptic. One day she falls down upon the earth, but is really not dead, for deep in her the little drum of her heart beats and beats, so dim one cannot hear. So she was buried in the graveyard in a fine, inexpensive box." Didn't you know she was cataleptic? Her sisters knew, but this time they thought her at last dead, and funerals are hasty things in this warm town. She was buried a few hours after her death? See, the same. All of this, as you see here, we would never have known if a year later her sisters, having other things to buy, had not refused the rent on her burial, so we dug her very quietly down and loosened the box, and took it up and opened the top of her box, and laid it aside and looked in upon her. Marie started. This woman had wakened under the earth. She had torn, shrieked, clubbed at the box lid with fists, died of suffocation in this attitude, hands flung over her gaping face, horror-eyed, hair wild. "Be pleased, senor, to find that difference between her hands and these others," said the caretaker. "Their peaceful fingers at their hips, quiet little roses. Hers are jumped up very wildly, as if to pound the lid free." Could rigor mortis do that? "Believe me, senor, rigor mortis pounds upon no lids. Rigor mortis screams not like this, nor twists nor wrestles to rip free nails, senor, or pries boards loose hunting for air, senor. All these others are open-mouthed, see, because they were not injected with the fluids of embalming. But theirs is a simple screaming of muscles, senor. This senorita here, hers is the muerte horrible." Marie walked, scuffling her shoes, turning first this way, then that. Naked bodies long ago the clothes had whispered away. The fat woman's breasts were lumps of yeasty dough left in the dust. The men's loins were indrawn, withered orchids. "Mr. Grimace and Mr. Gape," said Joseph. He pointed his camera at two men who seemed in conversation, mouths in mid-sentence, hands gesticulant and stiffened over some long-dissolved gossip. Joseph clicked the shutter, rolled the film, focused the camera on another body, clicked the shutter, rolled the film, walked on to another. 81, 82, 83. Jaws drawn, tongues out like jeering children, eyes pale, brown-irised in upclenched sockets, hairs waxed and prickled by sunlight, each sharp as quills embedded on the lips, the cheeks, the eyelids, the brows, little beards on chins and bosoms and loins, flesh like drumheads, and manuscripts and crisped bread dough. The woman, huge, ill-shaped tallow things. Death melted the insane hair of them like nests, made and unmade and remade, teeth, each single, each fine, each perfect in jaw. 86, 87, 88. A rushing of Marie's eyes, down the corridor, flicking, counting, rushing, never stopping, on, quick, 91, 92, 93. Here was a man, his stomach opened like a tree hollow, where you dropped your child love letters when you were 11. Her eyes entered the hole in a space under his ribs. She peeked in. He looked like an erector set inside, the spine, the pelvic plates. The rest was tendon, the parchment, bone, eye, beady jaw, ear, stupefied nostril, and this ragged-eaten caricature in his navel into which a pudding might be spooned. 97, 98, names, places, dates, things. This woman died in childbirth. Like a hungry like a little hungry doll. The prematurely born child was wired, dangling at her wrist. This was a soldier, his uniform still half on him. Marie's eyes slammed the furthest wall after a back-forth swinging from horror to horror, from skull to skull, beating from rib to rib, staring with hypnotic fascination at paralyzed, loveless, fleshless loins, at men made into women by evaporation, at women made into dugged swine, the fearful ricochet of vision growing, taking impetus from swollen breast to raving mouth, wall to wall to wall, again, like a ball hurled in a game, caught in the incredible teeth, spat in the scream across the corridor to be caught in claws lodged between thin teats, the whole standing chorus invisibly chanting the game on, the wild game of sight, recoiling, rebounding, reshuffling, on down the inconceivable procession through a montage of erected horrors that ended finally and for all time when visions crashed against the corridor, ending with one last scream from all present. Marie turned and shot her vision far down to where the spiral steps walked up into sunlight. How talented was death! How many expressions and manipulations of hand, face, body, no two alike. They stood like the naked pipes of a vast derelict calliope, their mouths cut into frantic vents, and now the great hand of mania descended upon all keys at once, and the long calliope screamed upon 100-throated, unending scream. Click went the camera, and Joseph rolled the film. Click went the camera, and Joseph rolled the film. Moreno, Morales, Cantin, Gomez, Gutierrez, Villanaswil, Urita, Lincoln, Naravo, Iturbi, Jorge, Filomena, Nina, Manuel, Jose, Tomas, Ramona. This man walked, and this man sang, and this man had 3 wives, and this man died of this, and that of that, and the third, and the third from another thing, and the 4th was shot, and the 5th was stabbed, and the 6th fell straight down dead, and the 7th drank deep and died dead, and the 8th died in love, and the 9th fell from his horse, and the 10th coughed blood, and the 11th stopped his heart, and the 12th used to laugh much, and the 13th was a dancing one, and the 14th the most beautiful of all. The 15th had 10 children, and the 16th is one of those children, as is the 17th. The 18th was Tomas, who died well with his guitar. The next 3 cut maize in the fields, had 3 lovers each. The 22nd was never loved. The 23rd sold tortillas, patting and shaping them each at the curve before the opera house with her little charcoal stove. And the 24th beat his wife, and now she walks proudly in town and is merry with new men, and here he stands bewildered by this unfair thing. And the 25th drank several quarts of river with his lungs, and was pulled forth in a net. And the 26th was a great thinker, and his brain now sleeps like a burnt plum in his skull. I'd like a color shot of each, and his or her name and how he or she died, said Joseph. It would be an amazing and ironical book to publish. The more you think, the more it grows on you. Their life histories, and then a picture of each of them standing here. He tapped each chest softly. They gave off hollow sounds, like someone rapping on a door. Marie pushed her way through the screams that hung net-wise across her path. She walked evenly in the corridor, centered, not slow, but not too fast, toward the spiral stair, not looking at either side. Click went the camera behind her. You have room down here for more, said Joseph. Si, senor, many more. Wouldn't want to be next in line, next on your waiting list. Ah, no, senor. No one would not wish to be next. How are chances of buying one of these? Oh, no, senor. Oh, no. Oh, no, senor. I'll pay you 50 pesos. Oh, no, senor. No, senor.